Hello and welcome to this Nolan Business Solutions webinar. Today we'll be taking you through the process of the procurement to pay within one of our GP modules, eRequest, as well as showing you a new development within eRequest for Amazon Business Punchout. My name is Campbell McLeish. I'm the Head of Sales and Marketing at Nolan Business Solutions. I'm joined with Joe Pryor, who's one of our consultants at Nolan Business Solutions. He'll be carrying out the demonstration, and Angela Barnes is also here on this webinar. She's one of our client account managers for Microsoft Dynamics GP at Nolan Business Solutions. So now to hand over to Joe to carry out the demonstration. Many thanks, Joe.
Hello and welcome to this latest demonstration of Nolan Business Solutions eRequest software. Today we'll be taking a look at how eRequest can be used to support the whole procurement to payment process. So it will be a fairly wide-ranging demonstration. Now, for anyone who has never seen the product, eRequest is an integrated system that fully automates the goods and services purchasing process, beginning with requisitioning, through to procurement and ending with the payment process. In today's demonstration, we'll be specifically highlighting the raising and approving of PO requests using specific approval route scenarios. We'll then look at transferring automatically generated purchase orders and receipts from eRequest over to Dynamics GP. Once the invoices for the goods and the services arrive, we'll go through how these invoices can be matched to original POs and sent off to eRequest for further approval if required. We'll then go on to look at how eRequest approves standalone invoices. These are invoices entered on an ad hoc basis in the Payables modules and not matched to any POs. Okay, I'll then go on to demonstrate how eRequest can integrate with Amazon, how customers can order goods directly from Amazon through the application, yet still have the benefits of the eRequest approvals process and the links directly to Dynamics GP. And I'll then finish off with a quick demo of some changes that have been made recently to the way that eRequest handles users being out of office. Okay, so let's get started. So for the purposes of the demonstration, I've set up a fairly simple office supplies approval route. As you can see, the first group on the hierarchy is the office manager group, of which Catherine is the only member. Catherine's got an approval limit of 5,000. So she'll be responsible for approving any PO requests up to and including £5,000. Anything greater than £5,000 will have to be submitted to the directors group, of which Mark is the default user. So he'll be receiving the majority of the PO requests, but there's also another member, Colin, and they'll be responsible for anything that's greater than £5,000. Okay, so we'll start by logging in as Catherine, who's going to be the originator of our first PO request. Now, I should say at this point that this is the standard username password login screen to eRequest. I'm going to be using this because it allows me to log in and out as more than one user, and it allows you to see the approval hierarchy in action. However, be aware that eRequest can be configured to link in with Windows Active Directory login, which means that you can bypass the login screen if you wish. Okay, so we'll log in first of all as Catherine, and we're logging into our Nolan Business Solutions company. So we'll log in, and we'll go to the all requests, open requests. Okay, so Catherine is presented on her desktop with three sections. The top section, request to action, are any requests that have been submitted to her and are waiting to be actioned by her. Now, because Catherine sits at the bottom of the hierarchy, that is empty at the moment. The waiting on others section, we can see there's a couple of requests there that have already been submitted to Mark, and they are waiting on Mark to action. If we scroll down, the recently completed section shows all of those requests that have originated with Catherine and have been approved and are completed. All right, so to create a new request, we click on the new request, and we get asked to select a request form. Now, request forms are ways of segregating the items or suppliers that are being ordered. So we're going to be ordering some office supplies today. So we're going to click on the office supplies request form. So Catherine is presented with what is effectively the purchase order request header. The request number of 42 is automatically generated with today's date. The originated group will be Office Manager, which, as we can see, that is the group that Catherine is a member of as an originating member of that group. She may be a member of other groups, and if that's the case, if she wants to kickstart a different approval hierarchy, she's got the option to drill into the lookup list and select whichever group she wants to be acting as a member of. The address code is the main address code of the company that she's logged into, which in our case is Nolan Business Solutions. So again, we can drill in there and have a look at the billing address or the shipping address. If there is more than one address for that particular company, again, if we go into the lookup list, it will give us the option of changing between different addresses. Okay, so next thing, she wants to add some detail to this request. So she clicks on Add Line, and she's going to be ordering some desk phones. So first thing she wants to do is to drill into the item number field and select phones. And then with the item description, she can give a more meaningful description. So it's going to be desk phones. Next, she's going to select a supplier from the vendor lookup. Now, there's two views that we can have to these suppliers. We can have the link suppliers only, which are going to be those suppliers that we have ordered these items from in the past. Or if we want to show the entire list of suppliers for the request forms, we can untick link suppliers only, and it will show the entire list. Now we want to select our AdTech Office Supplies. So we select that vendor, and we can see again that some fields are automatically populated. So the vendor name appears, the vendor's address code, which again automatically from the vendor item. The account number is the inventory account number that comes directly from the item when we selected it up here, and various other fields, the unit of measure, each, and the site ID. Now, all of these fields that are self-populated, if for any reason we want to change those values, we can always overwrite and drill into the lookup detail and select from there. Okay, so quantity, right? So we want to order 100 of these desk phones. The unit price for these is £55. The tax amount gets automatically calculated from the details that we entered further up the screen. This is just standard GP functionality. This is where all the data gets picked up from an eRequest. So in total, this request is going to come to £6,600. At this point, Catherine may want to check the budget that she has for this particular item or this particular account number. And to see that, if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, we can see we've got an annual budget of 120,000, of which 80,000 has been used at the moment, and the percentage of the budget remaining is 32.59. So she's going to be spending just over £6,000, so she's well within budget, so she's happy with that. Now, just to show what would happen if we were ever to exceed the budget, I'll put a really big number in here. And if we scroll down, so we're now well over the 120,000 budget. If that was the case, and if Catherine tried to save this record, she'll get prevented from doing so. It says you have now exceeded the budget for account 500-620 on item phones. So Catherine would not be able to save this record, and she wouldn't be able to progress the PO request any further. She would have to go away and speak to the budget holder. Okay, so that's not what we want to do. So we'll change that number back to 100. More meaningful, this time when she saves the record, goes back to the header, she doesn't get the error message. Okay, so the next thing that Catherine may be interested in doing is attaching documents to this request. It may well be that she's got a quote from her supplier that she wants to attach to the record so that anyone who's going to be asked to do the approvals for this request has all the information to hand. So to do that, she'll click on Attachments and then choose File. And if she looks for the invoice, so it's the AdTech invoice that we want to attach, and we simply add an attachment. Now, it could be that Catherine wants to add multiple documents to this request. She can do that, and it could be documents of multiple types. So it could be PDFs, JPEGs, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, absolutely anything at all. Okay, but we're happy with just that invoice. So we'll come back to our header. We can see that the attachment is now showing as a 1. So anyone reading this request can see straight away that there are attachments to this request. Now, the total of the request is just over 6,000, as we know. And if we go back to our structure, Catherine's approval limit is 5,000. So Catherine would not be able to approve this particular request. She would be forced to submit it. So even if she tries to click on the Approve button, a message will appear. You cannot approve this request. It is beyond your approval limit. So that's what we expect. So therefore, she's going to be forced to submit. So she's going to submit, and as we said before, Mark is going to be our default user. So that's why Mark's name appears within the lookup. But it may well be that we actually want to send it to Colin. And if that's the case, well, again, go to the lookup list and we can see all members of that directors group are available for selection. But we're happy with Mark for the moment, so we'll click on Submit. And we get a message that says, your request was submitted for approval. We'll say OK to that. What will now happen in the background is that an email will be sent to Mark telling him that request number 42 is awaiting his approval. Okay, so let's have a look at that email that was sent to Mark. So we can see request 42, it came from Catherine Walsh. It's got the line details with all the amounts and so on. Now, Mark can use this email in 2 ways. He can use it simply as an alert or a notification email to tell him that this request is awaiting his approval, and he will go off to eRequest, log in, and action the request. Or he can actually action the request directly from the email. He can click on the approve link here. And what eRequest will do is it will send an email back to the application email, in effect back to eRequest to say that this request 42, I am happy for it to be approved. So when he clicks on send, there's an agent's scheduled task that runs on the background that will pick up this email and it will action the email as if Mark was logged into the system and was manually doing the approval or the rejection. Okay. Now, that's not what we're going to do here today, but just be aware that that option is available to eRequest approvers. So we'll come out of there and we'll log out of Catherine and we'll log in as Mark. Okay, so we'll log in as Mark, and on his request to action, here you can see that one of those requests is request number 42. So Mark will drill into the detail and he gets to see all the same information that Catherine had just entered previously. You can see that there's one attachment. When he clicks on it, you can have a look at it. So the invoice PDF, you can open that file. That'll give him details of everything that has just been ordered. So he'll compare that against what he sees on eRequest. He can drill into the line items, and just like Catherine, he gets to see all the same information with all the budget information and so on. If Mark's happy with what he sees, he will click on the approve button because it's within his approval limit. So he clicks on approve, and we get a message saying that the request was approved. Now, when we say OK to this, the eRequest system is going to send an email back to Catherine to let her know that the request that she originated has now been approved, and it will also generate a purchase order both in eRequest and it will automatically transfer the details of that purchase order to Dynamics GP, which we'll look at a little bit later. So we'll say OK to that. And it's told us already that the PO number of PO 13 has been generated, and the transfer to GP has been a success. At the same time, let's look at the email. So this email has gone to Catherine, and it's just letting her know that request number 42 has been approved. Okay, so this purchase order that has been generated, let's log in as Catherine quickly. So when Catherine goes to purchase order inquiry, she knows she's looking for request number 42, which is this one here, and it's generated this purchase order here. Now, if we look at the details of that purchase order, so let's just drill into that. eRequest will generate a document. Now, this is just a standard Nolan Business Solutions document with the layout, and it has all the details of that purchase order requests. These reports are customizable. We can redesign these to suit any client, so we can change the logo, we can change the layouts, etc., and any information that's held on that report. So what Catherine would be thinking of doing next would be sending this report off to the supplier. Now, the way she would do it manually is to click on Email Supplier, and it automatically picks up the email address that's held on the creditor card in GP. Obviously, we can overwrite that email address and type in anything else, or we can configure it to be left blank, or we can also configure it in such a way that we do not have to go into the screen in order to send it manually. Whenever a purchase order gets generated in eRequest, we can set it in such a way that it will automatically email out to the supplier without anyone having to come in and manually send that email. The other option we can have is we can CC and add in any eRequest users to that email before we send it off. We can enter any subject and any message body that we want. Okay, so I'll just send that to myself for the moment. And that's been sent. Okay, I can see it's already arrived, so PO number OFF PO 13 has been sent to what would be the supplier. So the next stage of the process would be that Catherine would have the ability to receive the items when they arrive, and she can do that in eRequest and have them transferred across to GP. So the way she does that, she goes to receive PO by quantity. She can find her request, which is at the bottom of the list here, so request number 42. So 100 was ordered, and let's say that all 100 have been received, although we can do part receipts as well. And we'll enter a shipping document number. Okay, so we'll enter that amount, and we'll click on Receive. And it's telling us that a receipt has been created, and it's number OFF-RCT number 23, which we can now go to look at in GP along with the PO that was generated. Okay, so let's have a look at the receipt and the purchase order that have been transferred across from eRequest to GP. Okay, so we'll do a search on our AdTech supplier, and we're looking at purchase order number 13, last one on that list. And we want to look at the open purchase orders and the receipts. Okay, so let's have a look at the purchase order first. So if we look at the full details, we can see it's picked up the full line details. So it's got the correct supplier. It's got the 100 desk phones at £55, so that all looks good. And let's have a look at the receipt. So once again, the line details are all correct. When we go into the distributions, we can see it successfully picked up the purchase account code and the account code that would be used for any accruals. Okay, so we're happy with that. The next step in the process naturally would be to post that receipt in GP, and we'll just do that. We'll go in here, find the receipt. One thing you should notice is that it automatically gets put into a batch called eRequest. So that's to distinguish it from receipts that have originated in eRequest as opposed to receipts that have been manually entered in GP. So in order to post that, we have to go to the batch and we'll post that as normal. Okay, so that's done. Now, the next stage would be that once the goods have been received and an invoice has been received from the supplier. So the next step would be to match that invoice to the original PO. And the way we would traditionally do that is to go into Match Invoices. We, again, will select our AdTech creditor, enter the invoice document number, put it in the batch, which I'll call JP 2020, and we'll make use of the auto invoicing because it's so much easier rather than entering the detail line by line. So auto invoice, it will list all of the purchase orders outstanding for that supplier. The one that we're interested in is this PO13, and that's the one. So we select that, and then we click on, when we click on invoice, it's going to take all of those line items and copy them across to the invoice transaction. So click on invoice. That all gets copied across as we would expect. Now, the way that I've set up the invoice approvals rule within GP is that where the unit cost matches the purchase order cost, so at the moment it is an exact match, then we've said that there will be no approval required. And we can check that by going into the eRequest approval screen. And as you can see, approval not required. However, if I was to change the unit cost and create a variance, because very often invoices come in that are different from the price of the original purchase order. So the rule that I've set up is that only when there's a variance will it pick up an approval rule and will require further approval in eRequest. So I'm going to change that unit cost. We'll change that to 60. And we'll type through and it says the unit cost on the invoice is different. Is this correct? So we'll say yes to that. And at this point, now when I go into eRequest approval, it's picked up an approval rule called variance, which is fine. That's what we're looking for. And it said it requires approval by Catherine. Right, now, the reason it's picked up Catherine is because, again, that's what we've set as our default. But if I just go back to our structure, now, it may be that we're happy to send it off to Catherine to approve this invoice. But if we look at the lookup list, we've got the option, if we wish, to send it to any one of the users in that chain. So Catherine, Colin, or Mark. Or if we wanted to do a group approval hierarchy in the same way that the requisition hierarchy took place, we could send it to a group called Office Manager, which will include Catherine. And again, depending on the amount of the invoices, the approval limits will come into play. So therefore, if it's an invoice that's 5,000 or less, then Catherine can approve that invoice. And if it's greater than 5,000, then she'll have to submit it up the chain to the directors group, which will be Mark or Colin. Okay, so again, we have that option, but we're quite happy to send it just to the user Catherine. Now, the thing to remember with the users is that there are no approval limits with single users, and it will never have to go any further up an approval chain. So it's a one-stage approval. Okay, so we're happy for that to go to Catherine. Say OK. The next thing that we're probably interested in at this stage is attaching the invoice that we received from the supplier. So again, we use our drag and drop functionality. Ask me to save the record first. And the drag and drop screen comes up. Now, this is just standard document attachment, with the difference that this area here we can use to pick up our document. So in our case, the AdTech invoice, and we just pick it up and drop it into that area, and we can see it here. That drag and drop area is also very useful for when you have attachments to emails. You can pick up the attachment directly from the email and just drop it straight into the box without having to save it on a network location. All right, so we've matched our invoice to the PO. We've attached the invoice document, which Catherine will get to see, and we have pointed it in the correct direction, which is going to be Catherine Walsh. So we'll say OK to that. We'll save this record and come out of the batch. And next we'll move on to look at Catherine's invoice approval list in eRequest. Okay, so let's have a look at the email that Catherine received when the invoice was sent off to her. Now, as you can see, the invoice approvals emails are fairly basic. Generally, you would only get the first 2 lines saying that the invoice number is awaiting your approval. You can adapt those emails to include a link that will take Catherine directly to the invoice approvals list. So when she receives the email, she would click on the link. It would open up eRequest directly, and it would take her to the invoice approvals list. And you can see her invoice there waiting to be approved. So in order for her to approve this invoice, she'll drill into the details. And a bit like on the PO request side, she gets to see all the information that was entered in GP. So she can scroll down the screen, she can see all the amounts, the distributions, and all of the control accounts. She's happy with all of that. It may be that she wants to see the invoice, so the AdTech invoice is there. So she clicks on that. That will open up the invoice document. She'll have a look at that and compare that against what she's seeing on the eRequest screen. It may be that she wants to see details of the original PO, so if she clicks on that, that will take her back to that PO that's already been raised in eRequest. So she's got all that information to hand. If she's happy with what she sees, she would then click on the Approve button, and she'll get presented with this screen. So she's got the opportunity to enter an approval or a rejection note. Typically, we make the approval notes non-mandatory, but if it's a rejection, then we generally make that mandatory because it helps the finance user in GP as to the reason why the invoice has been rejected. It may be that it's got a wrong amount, maybe there's a document missing, maybe it's been sent to the wrong person. Okay, so the approval note is not mandatory, but we'll put something in anyway. So we'll say those desk phones have been approved. We'll say OK. And W19 says that the invoice approval has been completed. So we'll say OK to that. Now, what will happen back in GP is that the original invoice transaction will get taken out of its original batch, and it will be moved to an approved batch, an unposted approved batch, and that will be ready for the finance users in GP to go ahead and post that batch into the GL. Okay, so let's have a look at that in GP. Okay, so let's go back to our invoice batch that we'd entered before. And it was number 24. Okay, so all looks the same, but there's been a few changes since it's gone through the eRequest process. The first thing you'll notice is batch ID has changed to approved. So that's the first signifier that this transaction has been fully approved in eRequest. Also, if we go to the eRequest approval screen, you can see the status is now showing as approved. And if we go to the little post-it note icon, we can see the notes, which give a kind of potted history of everything that's happened with this invoice in eRequest. So we can see it was submitted and approved by Catherine, and then Catherine entered the note saying desk phones have been approved, and then the approval has been complete. So the finance user would be happy with that. So that's the end of the approval process and the matching process. So the next thing, the only thing left to do really is to post the approved batch, which we would do here. Again, this is all just normal GP functionality from this point forward. So we click on post and we let the posting routine run its course. Okay, so that all looks good. And that part of the process is now complete. Okay, so the final part of the procurement to payment process is the actual payment of the invoice itself. Now, this is just standard GP functionality, so I'm going to very quickly pay the invoice that we just looked at, and then afterwards we'll have a look at to see how that data is reflected when we go back into eRequest post-payment. So we shall do this quickly. Batch ID. Yep. Again, it's add tech, and it's this 7,200 that we want to pay. So we'll print payments. And process. Okay, so that's gone through without any errors. And that completes the payment process. So now we'll have a look at to see how that data is reflected in eRequest. So back into eRequest, I'm already logged in as Catherine. So if it's for the purposes of audit trail and someone wants to retrospectively look to see if these invoices or these POs have been paid, we can go to, well, let's go to the purchase order first. And we can see our purchase order is here against request number 42. So we'll look into the line detail. And against this request, if we scroll down, we can see the purchase order number, the receipt numbers, and the invoice numbers. And if we drill into the details of that invoice, for example, so we can see the receipt summary. So 100 was ordered, 100 was shipped. And if we look at the invoice, 98788, quantity invoice 100, fully paid. So it keeps the records up to date from the request side. Similarly, if we're looking at the invoice, and the invoice that Catherine was working on was this one here, 024. So again, when she goes into this, you can see all the same details as before. A couple of additional things. When she goes to notes, it will pick up that potted history that we saw previously in GP. And this time, when we go to payments against that invoice, it will reflect the fact that voucher number Pay006, full payment amount of 7,200. Okay, so that is the procurement to payment process complete for invoices matched to purchase orders. So now we'll have a look at invoices that are raised in GP within the Payables module. Okay, so now we'll look at invoices that are raised in the Payables module. These are invoices that tend to be ad hoc, standalone type invoices. They're not matched to purchase orders, and typically we find that they get used by customers for things like utility bills, for example. Okay, so let's raise an invoice. We go into the transaction entry screen, and we'll enter batch ID. And we'll enter a description. So let's say this is from BT. Okay, we select a creditor, so it's going to be BT OpenReach. And go into the document number. And we'll say this amount is for £1,200. Okay, so all of this fairly standard up until now. We want to check eRequest approval to see if it's picked up the approval rule that I'd set up previously. And it has, so it's picked up utilities. Just as before with these approval rules, it's defaulted to Catherine, but again, we've got the option of selecting any one of the users, or in fact, we could send it to any one of the groups in eRequest as well and send it up the hierarchy chain, as we've already seen. But we'll stick with Catherine for the moment. We'll say OK to that. And again, we've got the option if we wish to attach the invoice using the drag and drop functionality to this new invoice. So we'll pick up the BT invoice, drag and drop it across, say OK to that. And if we save that record, so it's NBS number 13, come out there, And we'll go straight into Catherine's invoice approvals list. Change that to awaiting approval. Okay, and then we can see NBS 13 is waiting for Catherine to action. From this point forward, there is absolutely no difference at all between a payables invoice or a purchasing order type invoice. It's exactly the same as before. They get the option to view the invoice, and they can look at the PO. Well, there is no PO details, but any of these other screens will become available once the information is to hand. Okay, so we want to approve as we did before. We'll leave the approval note this time, so we'll say OK, and it says the invoice approval has been completed. And again, it's going to take that original transaction and it's going to move it to a separate approved batch. So remember that payables and purchase order processing, if you're using invoice approvals for both, then it's going to create two separate approved batches. Okay, so let's have a look at that batch in GP. So this time we'll go to our batches screen, and there we go, it's approved. And I can see there's one transaction. It looks to be the right amount. Let's have a look at that. Yep, so again, if we go to eRequest approval, so it's now been approved. The batch, as we can see, has changed to approved, and the voucher number again gives us that same potted history that we saw previously. So just as with the purchasing side, the only thing left to do here is to post the approved batch. So yeah, so that's all posted without any errors. And that's, in a nutshell, that's how we deal with payables invoices. It's very similar to the process that we use on the purchase order side. Okay, so now we'll look at the Amazon Punchouts functionality. This is where eRequest integrates with Amazon and allows us to order goods directly from the Amazon website. So we'll log in as Catherine. We'll click on New Request. This time when it comes to select a request form, we'll select the Amazon Office POs because that one's got all the links to the Amazon website. When we get to this screen, at first glance, everything appears the same. It's the same header and the same line details, but rather than going into the line details to select those goods and services and suppliers from the data that's feeding from GP, we will go to this links button and click on Amazon, and that will take us directly to the Nolan Business Solutions accounts at Amazon website. Okay, so that's us logged in. We can see it's got the Nolan Business Solution address here, and we can see that the account holder is Colin Smith. So we're logged into Nolan's account, and today the item that we want to order is some pens. So let's use the select to find those pens that we need. Okay, and it's these blue ones we're interested in, packs of 10. And we want 100 of them. Enter 100. And we add that to our basket. Okay, so the 100 items comes to £299. If this was a normal Amazon website, at this point we would go to the checkout to pay for our items, but this time we want to submit these items for approval. And what should happen is that those line items will transfer across to eRequest and appear in the line item section of that PO request that we've just raised. So let's submit these for approval. Okay, and we can see the transfer has been successful, and we can see against the item numbers, there was 100 packs of pen at £299 each, so with an extended price of £300. Now, Catherine, her approval limit is lower against this request form. So even though it's only £300, she's going to submit this up the chain to either Mark or Colin. So she'll click on submit as before. So Mark's the default. We'll click on submit there. And we'll get the message that we got previously where it says your request was submitted for approval. We'll say OK to that. Mark will receive the same email with the option to approve and reject. So from this point forward, once the transfer from Amazon is taking place, we now move into just the standard eRequest approval mode, and it will move from group to group and user to user, and it will find its natural approval limits. Okay, so let's just have a look at that. We'll log in as Mark. And we can see request number 45 with those 100 boxes of pens, which he will approve. Request was approved. We'll say OK to that. And again, just as before, it will generate a purchase order in eRequest, and it will transfer it to GP. So from this point forward, the process is exactly the same as if we were ordering an item directly from the inventory in GP. Okay, so once the order has been received at Amazon, a purchase order gets emailed back to show the goods that have been ordered, as you can see here. So that comes back from the website. Okay, so that's how we deal with Amazon orders. Next, we'll have a look at the out-of-office functionality within eRequest. Okay, so if we go back to our approval route that we've been using up till now, when Catherine submits requests, generally speaking, they're going to go to Mark, but she does have the option of sending to Colin as well. So if Mark was to go on holiday, let's say for a couple of weeks, the way that the out of office works in eRequest is that Catherine still sees Mark as an option when she submits her requests, but Mark, before he goes on holiday, or an administrator, has the ability to assign a user to act in Mark's absence. So Mark can choose Colin, for example, to act in his absence. That means that when Colin logs in during Mark's holiday, he gets to see his own desktop and he can act as himself, submitting and approving requests, or he can switch to another desktop and he can look at Mark's outstanding requests and he can action them as if he was Mark. Okay, so let's have a look at that in action. So first thing we want to do is I'll log out and I'll log in as the administrator. This can actually be any user who's got administrator privileges. So we'll log in and we'll find Mark's user profile, and there's a setting here, the out of office section, which I'm going to click on and say Mark is now out of office between the dates of the 15th and the 29th of November, and the user we've allowed to act on Mark's behalf is going to be Colin Smith for both invoice approvals and for purchase order requests. Okay, so when we save that record, it now means that Mark is out of the office as far as eRequest is concerned. So we'll log in as Catherine and we'll kickstart another new request. More office supplies. We shall order some, let's get some stationery this time, and we'll say paper supplies. We'll use our AgTech vendor as before, and we'll say we want 20 packets at £5. Okay, we'll save that record. And so this time Catherine wants to submit this to Mark. So when she clicks on submit, she'll get the same message that she would normally. So she selects Mark with a slight difference. So it now says that your request was submitted for approval. Warning, Mark is out of office between these two dates and Colin Smith is able to approve this request on their behalf. So Catherine has been notified of the fact that although she is submitting to Mark, there is the possibility that between those two dates, it's going to be Colin who will do the actioning. And what will also happen is that the email that gets sent out, Mark will receive an email as he would normally, but at the same time, because Colin's the assigned user, he will also receive an email with the same notification. So if I go to my inbox, now you can see what it's done. It's done a to and a CC. Because this is the same address, you can see that it's been sent off to two separate users. Now, obviously, if Mark and Colin had their own email addresses, it would go in both directions. So that's where the two emails go to. So now I'm going to log in as Mark, and we'll have a look at Mark's normal desktop if he was in the office. So we can see he's got under request to action 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 requests, including 46 that we just sent off to Mark from Catherine. Mark's out of the office at the moment, so he can't do anything about these. So we'll log out, and then this time we'll log in as Colin. So when Colin logs in, we can see that his request to action, he doesn't have anything outstanding at the moment. But the setting in the top right-hand corner, when we say act on behalf of Mark, the desktop changes, and you can see he is now currently acting on behalf of Mark under the company Nolan Business Solutions, and he's now seeing Mark's desktop, so he gets to see everything that Mark would see if he was logged in normally. And then Colin can go in and he can just submit and approve as if he was Mark. So he'll approve that PO. Request was approved. Okay, generates a purchase order. At any time, Colin can just return to his original user and he can go back to his own desktop. At the same time, the emails that get generated, if we have a look, so this request number 46 has been approved, but it does note the fact that Colin is the one that's done the approving, acting on behalf of Mark Hennessy. So that's how the out of office works in eRequest.
That's great. Thank you very much, Joe, for that. And many thanks to you all for attending and for your time today. If you have any questions or would like to find out more information about eRequest, the Amazon Punchout, or any of our other products or solutions that we might have on offer, please do give us a call. Our number is 01252 811 663, or you can email us at sales@nolanbusinesssolutions.com, or you can email Angela Barnes directly. Her email address is abarnes, so that's ABARNES, @nolanbusinesssolutions.com. Or check out our website, www.nolanbusinesssolutions.com. Many thanks again for your time, and hopefully hear from you soon. Thank you.